Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Creative Confidence series, where I'm going to talk about projects I made, projects I like, and the story behind them, what was difficult, and lessons learned, as well as, how to be more creative. So, I like boxes a lot, as you can probably tell from this series, and this is the horizontal bookcase that sits above my bed frame. Now, at the time, this is where I actually moved in to this house. This is probably 2019 when I'm making this, because I moved in at the end of 2018 to where I currently live. And the nice part about this was I actually got somebody from Kentucky to build these two for me. They are just MDF boxes. They look modular. They have a kind of little space here to route cables, so that was great. So I was getting the bed frame in, it was coming to the house, so it took a couple weeks to get here. And I was like, okay, great, this is wonderful. We're gonna have a good time. We're gonna make this happen. So what I wanted, because I just had this huge space above the bed, was something to store things, something to put stuff on there. So my brain went directly to the wonderful world of this bookcase that is horizontal, because why not? You can tell I like to make certain boxes. So the nice thing about this one is, back in when I first moved into this house in 2018, from I think 2018 to about 2019, Lowe's used to sell these oak panels. Now again, I love oak for a lot of reasons. It's really easy to work with, it's really easy to use. And I just took some measurements on the wall, and I said I want it to sit between these two. So it needs to sit in the middle between these two and kind of frame out the bed. So that was the whole design thing here. And this is all mid-century modern style for me. So that is what I was going for. So because of that, I went to Lowe's and I bought these oak panels. Now, nice thing about these oak panels is that they used to come in 8-foot long lengths. They used to come in 8-foot long lengths, and they used to be able to buy them for fairly, all things considered, cheaper than you would have to pay for pieces of oak that you would have to basically, join together with clamps and everything. And at this time, I wasn't trying to always go to my friend's house, because I had a house to build these things. So this was after the first year where I spent a lot of money, more money than I had ever spent on tools in my life. And now I wouldn't mind spending that every year if I didn't have other things to pay for. But I bought these, and they're great because they allow you to quickly kind of make things. And if it's just a box, you can butt join them. So these panels were relatively reasonably priced, and because it was oak, you could get really good finishes. Now, with this construction, there's kind of two pieces to it that make it strong, and I kind of had to think about how I wanted to do this. So these here, and maybe I should have actually made this actually be not a butt joint here, but maybe like a butt joint here, so it should have been connected there. But say la vie, hindsight is 2020. But I did hide the screw holes here with some wood putty that you can kind of make out there, sort of. But with that, I would sink the screws in, butt it together, and my roommate at the time, he taught me a trick. He was an old carpenter, so he framed houses for a long time. He was a handyman. He did a bunch of stuff. So one of the tricks he taught me is just, kind of lining up the sides here, making sure they're both flush. And when both of those are flush, you screw them together. And you pre-drill the hole and you screw them together. So at this time, for this to be set up, I drew my lines and created made sure everything was where it was, and I just drew a line on each side, and then I actually went back and came back, and I think in here, I sanded all of this, but I think I also put some wood filler in that little gap, and just made sure I filled out, you know, as much of this as possible. This is a piece that's still in my bedroom today and it's hanging up there. So the nice thing about these panels, as you can see, that's really apparent here, is that you get really good grain direction, you get really good continuity. You can kind of, not necessarily book match stuff, but it's pretty easy to get a really good looking piece. So you can kind of see here, you see it looks really cohesive. So that top and that bottom kind of match, which was the beautiful part about these panels. Now Lowe's doesn't really sell those panels anymore, which is a sad reality of life, but it happens. I think Menard sells them and a few places will sell them, but for the most part, like, this was great to go to a big box store and go grab them. That was one of the things I missed. You can do this with plywood, but I didn't want edge band. I'll talk about that in another project. But this was one of the beautiful parts about this project. And as you can see here, the Danish oil really does go in. Now remember, like I said in another project, that oak really is this color every time you get it. But because that oil really can soak in, I used the dark walnut on most things that I make with oak, and got this beautiful dark walnut color. So much so you really, unless I'm telling you, you just know wood grain direction and wood in general, you're not gonna really know this isn't walnut, which is kind of the point. It could be lighter walnut, it doesn't look exactly the same, but it's a solid piece, and this is made of oak. This thing probably weighs more than I like to admit because I had to hoist it up. Now, the other part of this that you saw in the original shot, that very first shot that is above the bed, and the whole design strategy behind that is I wanted it to pretty much blend in. So I could have left it open and I could have made it, just look like part of the wall. But what I didn't do that. I just painted, I put a sheet of plywood, I cut it down and put it on the back to add some more strength. But with that added strength, I could come in here and paint. So that piece of plywood was painted separately, and you had already seen the build there. As you can see, I just made sure all of these corners are nice and neat and together. So basically, my roommate, my old friend, taught me how to line that stuff up. You put the screws in and you go from there. And so what I did was put, I think screws are in the back of this as well, but this was painted. We put all the screws in and we went from there. And that was the nice thing about this project, is it's still in the wall today. So the reason I added a piece of wood on the back was because I needed to add a cleat. Now, what I use on anything I'm gonna put on the wall is from Hangman, and it's a cabinet cleat. That's what it's called. It's like, I think this one is a 36-inch cabinet cleat. It was not necessarily cheap. I think this whole project I was in probably $200 or maybe $250, but it is a very nice piece of wood. But this was also before the pandemic, so it might have been around 200, including the Danish oil and the wood and everything else. But it was just nice to have the ability to create a custom piece for me that no one else has in their house. And on top of that, it was fun to do that. Now, there are a couple things I would have done differently. Like I said, here I would have probably to add more strength, right? Because the load is going to be going here. I probably, no, I think I might have done that correctly. I don't know. But I probably would want to, no, this is right. I think this is right because I wanted the load to be pushed down. So if it's pushing down, that means you need screws coming in from that side. Whereas if it's pushing up, yes, that is correct. So there's a couple things I would have done differently here. One, I probably would have made this a bit shorter. This is massive, and this is the whole 8 feet. And I probably would have just capped it right at 8 feet. That probably would have been the best thing to do. I did miss some of the screws in here, so there are some extra little holes on the bottom that got filled. You don't really look at it and see it because the Danish oil does a great job of covering it up. But there are little extra holes there around that. So I probably would have cut a piece of wood actually. That was the width that I wanted, which is what I've what I've done since then, and just put it in there in the bottom and the top, and then pre-drill the holes, or use the corner clamp that I have now, because I didn't have that at the time, to kind of line that up, and then I would have essentially just screwed it together after I pre-drilled the hole. The other thing is, on a couple of these, I didn't pre-drill, so I had extra holes in the wood. Always pre-drill your wood. It just makes your life easier. Trust me, just pre-drill the wood. Takes more time, and yes, screws say they should be able to sink, but just pre-drill the wood. The other thing I did use on this is I did get to use construction screws. So I'm not a big fan of drywall screws. I usually will use the GRK fasteners that are really great and allow you to kind of have this added strength, but this is glue and screws. And so most of the time I'm building something that's gonna be around for a while, especially out of heavier wood, it is glue and screws. Again, this is just something that I came up with off the top of my head because I thought it would look cool, and it ended up looking pretty good. This table is still around, but this table at the time was supposed to be my only dining table. Now I have to put a tablecloth over it because I didn't have a work table to work on anything. So I built this when I first moved in to my current house with just straight up determination and grit. And I think a SawStop table saw that I ended up, the job site one, I ended up buying, which was at the time the most expensive tool that I owned. So this is probably one of my favorite projects because it was just straight up, hey, we're gonna just do something and we're gonna make it happen. And I made it happen. And I came up with a good design, and it's still in there today, and it ties in with the whole motif and theme, and it's one of my favorite things. So again, you can build anything you want if you just try. I think for me, I started with hard stuff like the Nelson bench and that day bed, which I had no business building, but my friend was a big help. But if you are thinking about stuff, this was pretty much a solo build. I didn't even use anybody to lift it up. That's the other thing. If you're trying to put something on the wall, get somebody to help you, because I almost felt like I had to put this on hoist this up on a step stool with the cleat and everything and try to get it into place. And luckily I did, but I almost dropped it twice. So I do not recommend that. So just get help. If it says team lift, just get somebody else to help you. But thank you for coming. Thank you for liking it and subscribing. Please like and subscribe, share it with your friends, and see you next time.